Hey guys, I am Pixel Dan, and this is a review of the Masters of the Universe Ultimate Filmation He-Man. That is right, my friends. This is a long overdue reissue of the Filmation style He-Man action figure. Filmation He-Man was originally released by Mattel several years ago. Many fans missed out on him, so recently Super 7 opened up pre-orders for a brand new Ultimate variation, which not only gives us a reissue with some improved parts, but also he comes with a ton of extras and brand new packaging. The packaging is beautiful. Like the other Ultimate Classics figures that Super 7 released, this new He-Man comes on the standard blister card that looks just like the vintage He-Man action figures. That classic red rock burst in the background, the blue starry sky at the top. Oh, I love it. Just really brings back those vintage feels. It's such great packaging. I think this is awesome. I love seeing it like this. You'll also notice that behind the figure, there's a little postcard there of some artwork that is supposed to be sort of like the mini comics that were packaged with the vintage action figures. If we flip this around to the backside, you can see we've got ourselves a cross cell here that shows off some of Super 7's other vintage offerings, Filmation offerings, and some of the other Masters of the Universe Classics figures that they've done. I also love this new artwork here that shows how the action feature works, which is a great nod to the vintage Mattel toys, but the action feature here being that you can pull to remove head and push alternate head onto peg. I think that's great. And then up at the top, we've got this great image of He-Man in transformation. It says, Prince Adam calls upon the power within Castle Grayskull to become He-Man, most powerful man in the universe. Really, really great packaging. I love it. I actually almost hate to open this up, but we're going to do it. We're going to rip that packaging open, and we're going to take a closer look at the figure within. All right, let's get our Ultimate Filmation He-Man outside of the packaging to get a closer look at him. So we'll start with the scale as always, where you can see the figure stands right at 7 inches tall. So right on par with everything else from this particular lineup here. And the figure is a pretty great representation of the character as he appeared in the animated He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon series. The figure itself looks pretty clean as far as the paint deco goes. I really don't have any issues with the exception of this little orange piece right here on the back of his arm that's kind of bled off of his forearm paint there. You can actually kind of see some brush strokes on there as well, so it's not as crisp and clean as I'd like it to be. But that's really the only paint mess I've got on this particular figure. Otherwise, he looks pretty great. The plastic that's used is that kind of glossy plastic that we've seen with a lot of the recent Super 7 releases, so you can really notice that, especially under my studio lights here, how glossy the torso is. Now, the main thing that I think we need to do with this guy is really focus on what differentiates this version from the previous release of Filmation He-Man from Mattel. So let's go ahead and do this real early on in this video. It's comparison time. So I want to bring in the Mattel version of the Club Grayskull He-Man to stand alongside the Super 7 release. So we've got our Mattel one over here on the right, our Super 7 one here on the left. And you can see that there is some minor differences. If we look at the heads here, I do believe the sculpts are the same. I don't know if they were able to reuse the same sculpt, but the sculpts do appear to be the same, if not very, very similar, but the paint deco is different. The Mattel release does seem to have more of a painted face, while as the Super 7 one seems to just be cast in the flesh color there, which you could really tell the difference in just by looking at the way that the colors look on the face. There's also a little bit of extra coloration on the Mattel one as well, and the hair is a little bit darker, but otherwise the sculpts look pretty good. You can see the skin tone is the same on the Mattel one. He's not quite as glossy as the Super 7 one, and he's got a little bit of a darker tan there. But as far as the paint goes, that's really the biggest difference. But there are some other differences with the way the articulation works and some of the sculpting on here as well. For example, the Mattel one kind of had the more open, furry loincloth on the bottom, which was pretty common for a lot of Mattel's Masters of the Universe Classics figures. You can see the Super 7 one is different because the sculpt actually comes all the way around, which I actually do approve of. I like that. That looks a bit better, honestly, than the little hanging loincloth piece that we've got there. One of the other differences that I noticed is that the Super 7 version, the joint on the right hand is different. It does still have the hinge joint that allows you to rotate the wrist in and out. However, Mattel's version had that hinge joint on the top of the wrist, and the reason for this was so that he could properly hold the sword aloft in an I have the power pose. So I'm actually kind of bummed that Super 7 removed that and changed the joint around, because now you can't get that same pose that you could with the Mattel figure. One of the biggest differences is going to be down here with the ankle joints. Now, you might remember that when Mattel released these figures, the ankle joints were very, very ugly. And luckily, they weren't like this for very long. They fixed them after a couple figures. So our Super 7 release has much better looking ankle joints that function just the same. You can see we still have the pivot. We can still move forwards and backwards, but they're not near as ugly as those weird joints that we got with the Mattel version. So other than that, there's not a whole lot different, but it definitely felt like it was worth comparing them side by side so you could really see the differences between the two figures. So while we've got them out here, let's go ahead and keep talking about the articulation, because otherwise it functions exactly as you would expect it to. The ball-like joints at the shoulders, you got the swivels at the bicep, you got real tight joints at the elbows, so it's kind of have the ratchet to them. Very standard for what we've seen with a lot of Super 7's figures recently. You do have the hinge joint on both wrists there. You got a nice tight torso, ab crunch, you got swivel at the waist, you do have the ball-like hinges at the thighs, so they can go outwards, forwards, and backwards, as well as swivel. Tight ratchet joints in the knees there, swivels at the boot, and then you've got those ankles that we just talked about. So the articulation is really good on this guy. The joints do seem nice and tight, with the only exception being the thighs. That's kind of been common with these. It seems like they're a little loose at the thighs, but not too bad. He still stands just fine. So the only thing I really wish he would have been able to keep is that other hinge joint that was on the Mattel one, so that he could properly hold his sword up. But otherwise, pretty nice looking figure, and it's a good reissue of the version that we got from Mattel. Now, one of the best things about this reissue is all of the extra accessories that we get. Now, first of all, you might have already noticed here that he does have the sword sheath on his back, and he houses the power sword. So the power sword is just cast in this gray plastic. There's no extra paint detail on the sword whatsoever this time around. And it does appear to be the same mold as what we got before. So we've got the standard power sword, because you can't have He-Man without his power sword, right? Now, some of the extra accessories that he includes is a new battle axe, a version that we have not had for this particular He-Man figure before. And we've got the animated version of the shield, which we didn't see very often, but it did appear, and it is a bit different looking. You can see it's based on the shield from the vintage toy, but it's much bigger, specifically than the version that came with the original Masters of the Universe Classics He-Man figure. It's got a handle on the inside there. The red is the only painted detail. Otherwise, the rest of it is just cast in that same light gray plastic seen on the power sword. So now we can arm him up with that new shield if we want to do so. Pretty cool stuff. And then, of course, the biggest new change is that we've got several swappable heads with this particular He-Man action figure. So you could very easily just take the standard head off of the ball joint, very much like what we've always seen with Masters of the Universe Classics, and we can pop in some different heads, like the Laughing Head. Now, if you picked up the Laughing Prince Adam figure that Super 7 released, you're already familiar with this head sculpt. It is cast in the same colors to match He-Man's body this time. It's a very funny looking sculpt, but it's meant to kind of get that head thrown back laughing pose that we often saw in the Filmation series. Aside from that, we've got heads that allow you to basically change them into a completely different character, like Filmation's version of Faker. So we do have the robotic face sculpt without the faceplate on there, which is very cool looking, has that very They Live vibe. But the bulging out eyes there, the crazy white teeth, the red wires. So that's a really cool and very different look that we've never seen on the figure before. In addition to that, you've also got a He-Man head that has glow glowing white eyes, which again is meant to represent the way Faker looked in the animated series. So it's just kind of like this frosted on white paint over the eyes there. That's how they got the glowing effect, but it works rather well. I think it looks really cool. And one of the things I like about these alternate heads is that if you were buying this, but you already have Filmation He-Man in your collection, well, now you have an excuse to display Filmation Faker in your collection. It's pretty ingenious to include all of these extra heads, and they really are a true bonus for this particular figure. So there you guys go. There is a look at the brand new Ultimate Club Grayskull He-Man figure based on his appearance in the Filmation He-Man and the Masters of the Universe cartoon series. This was definitely a reissue that was a long time coming because, as I mentioned, so many people missed out on the original Mattel release. But if you did already have that Mattel one in your collection, this new one comes with a ton of new accessories, including those alternate heads, allowing you to display a brand new character in your collection as well. Overall, I like this guy. I think he's a pretty solid action figure. I had minor nitpicks with, kind of the glossiness of the plastic and the different hinge joint on the wrist, but otherwise, he's pretty solid all the way through, and I definitely love those extra heads. So the Ultimate He-Man was sold exclusively through Super 7's website on a pre-order basis only. So if you missed out on that, your only chance of picking this guy up at this point is to find him on the secondary market. So happy hunting, my friends. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, leave me a comment to let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, my friends.